So in this video, we're going to talk about 3 mistakes that I think a lot of beginner videographers make that are actually pretty easy fixes. So hopefully this will help you out as you're making some content. So the first mistake I see a lot of people making is actually just bad framing. And what I mean by framing is sort of where you're situated in the frame of the image. Whether we're talking about sort of a talking head piece like this, or maybe a product or anything like that, a lot of times I've seen people place their head right in the middle of the frame, kind of like this, and it just doesn't seem to work. There's too much headroom, or maybe the camera's way too close and it just doesn't feel right. A really easy remedy for this is just to lower the camera down a little bit, make sure that you're still centered, but that your body is centered. It's not that your nose is in the perfect center of the frame, but that you're maybe just a little bit higher up so that the top of your head is pretty close to the top and you've got less headroom. So of course you can use framing in many creative ways, and one of the main tools that we use is a thing called the rule of thirds, which is, you'll often see on cameras, have this grid system. And the points where the lines overlap are actually a pretty good target to place the thing that you're wanting to have in your frame. So for example, maybe during an end screen to your video, you want to maybe have some content on the side of your frame. So what you might do is move over to this side, still trying to keep yourself roughly in the rule of thirds frame, and you can talk about things on the screen right here or here. Or just as you're talking to the camera, you want to keep yourself kind of centered. So framing is something to play around with. It can feel very unnatural if your framing is off. Now, another mistake that I see a lot of beginner videographers make is that they're just buying the wrong gear. Now, you might see a lot of people on YouTube say that, gear doesn't matter, or other people saying that gear is like the most important thing in the world. And they're kind of both correct, but the important thing is just to make sure that you buy the gear that you need, and that's kind of it. The main thing I see people spending way too much money on is actually their camera body. You see, I know that an FX30 or an A7 IV and A7S III are like really desirable cameras, and they're fantastic cameras, don't get me wrong, but those are really expensive. I mean, I know the FX30 is very well priced for the type of camera you're getting, but after taxes, it's still $2,000. So for example, what we're going to do is show 2 different shots, both using the same budget of about $2,000, just to show you the difference that you can have by spending less money on a camera body and more money on other things that you need to make your shot look and sound better. So as an example, this shot that you're watching and listening to right now costs about $2,000. We're using a Sony a7 III, it's about $1,800. Fantastic camera, even in 2023, still a really good camera. We're using a super cheap, about $80 kit lens, and around $50 to $100 microphone. And it's on the camera quite far away, so this probably sounds terrible, but this shot costs $2,000. Now to put this into perspective, now this shot also costs about $2,000. We're using a $700 camera, the Sony ZV-E10, on a $500 lens, and then we've got about $600 or $700 worth of lights in the room. And the microphone is a little bit more expensive. It's about $100, and it's also off the camera and much closer to my mouth to be a lot crisper. The lighting wise, we've got an Aperture Amaran 60X giving me some light from over here, a 60D giving us this light on the back going through a snoot, and a 100D giving me my key light. So investing a lot more in lighting and a nicer lens gives us way better image than just having a nicer camera body. And to me, this is a massive difference. If you've got $2,000 to spend on a budget, don't spend all of it on the camera body. There are so many other things that you're going to need in your arsenal that will actually have a much bigger impact, especially in a studio environment like this, than just the camera body. Lenses especially will have far more impact on your image than the camera body that you're using. That's why I recommend the Sony ZV-E10 so much. It is a very cheap camera, but when used correctly, you can get incredible image quality out of it. With the right lighting and the right audio to back up the image, it's a fantastic little camera. And I see a lot of people in the comments saying that the ZV-E10 is useless. I had one comment in a previous video saying that the rolling shutter on the ZV-E10 is so bad that the camera is completely useless. And it is true, in 4K, the rolling shutter is really bad. But again, when I went to that person's channel, all of their footage was a static shot. The camera wasn't moving. So at that point, the rolling shutter is not even going to take effect anyway, so you may as well buy a cheaper camera and invest more in lights and audio and other gear. So last, let's talk about lenses. Now, one main mistake that a lot of people make with lenses is just using the wrong lens for the wrong shot. I'm not really going to talk about that today. There's loads of really good YouTube videos about using the right lens for the right shot. I'm going to link a couple below if you want to check those out. But what I want to talk about, I don't hear a huge amount of people talking about, and that's using fast lenses like f1.4 or f1.8 lenses and always shooting wide open. Because not every shot requires you to be wide open. Actually, sometimes you want to close down the aperture of your lens. I know we can get excited whenever we buy a lens that's like an f1.4, or for the Sony ZV-E10 I've got a cinema lens coming in that's a t1.05, which is crazy. But the problem is I'm not always going to shoot at 1.05. It's nice to have that capability, and it's nice to have f1.4 and f1.8, especially for low light or for some background separation, but that's not always the case. For example, if you take a look at this shot, this is kind of like an over-the-shoulder shot of someone reading a book, or you could do this with holding an item or whatever it might be, and we're filming it at 1.4 at a 50mm, and it's actually kind of hard to tell what the book is, or there's too much separation. Whereas if we dial this back to f4, we can see more of what's going on in the frame, and it's actually easier to tell the story when you can see what's happening. Now, I know background blur is big, and I know it's really popular, and it is incredibly useful, and it's great. I'm filming this at 1.8 right now, and I would recommend getting faster lenses, but don't always shoot wide open. Your lens will get sharper for the most part, most lenses anyway, when you close down the aperture to f4, 5.6, maybe f8, they get a whole lot sharper and you get a whole lot more detail in your photo or video, and a lot of the other problems like chromatic aberration or distortion can get fixed in dropping the aperture. So maybe you have fast lenses, f1.4, f1.8, great lenses to have, really good for low light and the background separation. Those are good things. But don't always shoot wide open, because sometimes the shot or the story requires you to close down the aperture a bit so that we can tell what's going on. Now, there's many more things we could add to this list, and I've got a video coming out in a couple of weeks specifically about the ZV-E10 and 5 ways that I think you could get really good cinematic footage from such a cheap camera like this. So subscribe to see that. I appreciate you guys watching. If you drop a like or leave a comment, I'd really appreciate it. And other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.